All right, welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, as you've seen in that welcoming slide, those two gentlemen joining us today. Mr. Samuel Adeniran is the Statistician General of the Federation and Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics, that's the NBS. And then sitting beside him is Mr. Peter Hawkins, is the UNICEF representative in Nigeria. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Let me start with you, Mr. Adeniran. Yeah, I know we've seen that report, but if you could just give us a further background in terms of what the core essence is, the objectives of why you ventured into this.
Thank you very much. The Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey is a global household survey that countries across the world conducted every 4 years to assess the situation of women and children in the country. We have done 5 rounds of the mix, and this one that we launched yesterday was the 6th round. In that survey, we have various indicators that address women's situation, children's situation, and recently about children between age of 5 to 17 years. These are done for government to have data to assess the performance in the achievement of sustainable development goals, as well as other national agenda that we have. The survey also is an avenue or a platform for not only the NBS, but the entire Nigerian statistical system to be able to adopt statistically standard practice in the conduct of our surveys. In that survey as well, we have opportunity to improve on the methodology that we use for our household surveys, as well as increase the quality that we embedded into various household surveys that we conduct in the country. So in a nutshell, it is a platform for NBS to improve on the conduct of our surveys, as well as building capacity of the various components of the Nigerian statistical system. That is what is in need for us as NBS.
But Mr. Hawkins, in addition to perhaps whatever you might also want to add to it, if you could equally talk about what would you consider as some of the key highlights worthy of note in this particular report?
I think it's important to say, one, that it gives national figures as well as state figures. It's disaggregated down to state by state, region by region, so you can look at the variations, look at what is Nigeria progressing, and is the state progressing, yes or no, or where it is not. I think some of the highlights, if you want to look at some of the good news, is around immunization, perhaps, from 50% to 57%, which with the last mix, it was down to 34% to 57%. That's a massive increase. If you look at some of the areas of major concern, would be around education, especially the out-of-school children, in primary school children, where 1 in 4 are not going to school, are out of school, 10.22 million. But I think it also is a fascinating reading for everybody to look at, especially the social economists. It looks at foundational learning, it looks at social behaviors amongst the young people, amongst the middle-aged people, and amongst the older generation. And it really does look into some of the psyche of what Nigeria has become. I think the biggest concern, as I alluded to earlier on, is about the disparities at state level. Some states are progressing exceptionally well, some states are lagging very much behind in most areas.
And this is a really useful document, especially as Nigeria goes towards the political year. These are the issues that should, because these are the issues that Nigerians face on a daily basis. For instance, one of the indices which our correspondent captured that had improved was breastfeeding. There has to be questions as to what exactly is enabling breastfeeding figures improve. Is it that states are coming up with policies that are more mother-friendly? I mean, is it that there is better education in that regard? And these are figures that actually go to the heart of, Nigerians. I want to ask you, for you, what state would you say you have noticed the most marked improvement since the last poll was done? And are there any surprises here for you?
I think it's less about improvement, it's more about status quo for the high-achieving ones, say Lagos. It's roughly staying the same. And remember, since the last one, we've had COVID as well. So any status quo is actually a gain in many ways. But I think you've picked on one very, very important topic around nutrition and breastfeeding, which the two are hand in hand. The indicators around nutrition, especially in areas in the north, are very worrying, around wasting, around stunting. If we take stunting, for example, one of the big areas that helps address stunting is breastfeeding. So the breastfeeding for exclusive breastfeeding has increased substantially, 10 percentage points if I remember correctly. But for breastfeeding within 1 hour has dropped. And that would be an indicator about institutionalized birth and rural births. So having skilled attendants at rural births or births in the homestead. One of the problems there is skilled birth attendance has remained static at 50%. It hasn't increased or decreased, and the population has increased substantially. So you're seeing advancements in one side, but in certain areas, especially the rural areas or the non-highly urbanized areas or the poorer areas of the country, where you're seeing degradation, and we need to really address that disparity urgently.
If I'm correct, the last time a poll of this type was done, was it in 2016?
That's correct.
2016. So we've already passed the 4-year mark. I mean, this is almost 6 years after before this one now is being done. It's a good thing to see that the NBS is very much involved in this. We've seen that the NBS is now more and more involved with polls. Well, you've always been involved, surveys that have international dimension and, are useful in measuring a few things. For instance, drug abuse, etc. Are you feeling any pressure from, did you come under any pressure whatsoever while this poll was going away? Would you say that states, I don't know if they were aware that you were carrying out this survey, were they curious to really know where they stood in terms of, some of the indicators which you covered in this particular survey? Yeah,
so the National Bureau of Statistics is the main implementer of this multiple indicator cluster survey, as well as the other survey that you mentioned, like the drug use and health survey, the corruption survey. As far as official statistics is concerned in the country, it is the mandate of the National Bureau of Statistics either to conduct it on our own or we conduct it in collaboration with other agencies of government or international partner like the UNICEF for this mix. So one thing that we enjoy at the National Bureau of Statistics is that for all our releases and our survey results, there is no pressure from government to tamper with what the result is saying. I can give that credit to the present government that we have. The two ministers that are supervising us, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, as well as the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, never intervene in what we do. When we release our data, they see it just as any other person in the country has seen it. And from the state, one thing that we do is that for ownership and for the credibility of the result, right from planning stage, we always involve state stakeholders. The state Surgeon General will be there. All directors from relevant departments at the state level will be involved right from when we start, so that the transparency will be there, the credibility will be there, and they also at their own state level monitor the conduct of the survey, so that the NBS will not be seen as either when the result comes out, they are not aware or they don't even know when the survey was conducted. But in terms of the result,
so the acceptability too should also be there.
Yeah.
I want to imagine that the Nigeria Governors Forum will be very interested in results like this, in surveys like this. Do you give them like a peek into the results before you eventually go public by launching the report?
So what we do is when we have the data analyzed and processed, so we call all relevant stakeholders for the validation of that result. Among them are ministry, department, agencies, because for the survey we have two bodies, governing bodies that oversee the conduct of the survey. We have the National Steering Committee that comprises CEOs and head of government agencies, as well as state government. Then we have technical committee that also look into the methodology and the strategy that we use for the survey. So the Nigerian Governors Forum, to the extent, is just to participate at the validation of the result after we have processed it and have the first draft of the result.
If I could just follow up
just to let them see that the result is ready, will soon be launched, but not to tamper with it.
No, not to tamper with it, but I imagine, I mean, their peer review mechanism, they should be able to take on the issues.
And say, yes. But so where there are outliers, so why is this happening like this? And then
the other way.
Able to, or the other way, and be able to explain the situation.
But speaking about methodology, as the implementer of this particular report, as you also alluded to earlier, this survey represents 39,000 households, is it?
Yes.
So how significant is it? Because I know you might have heard that, wait a minute, 39,000 households? Because if you're going to be implementing that, was it a question of what? How significant is it? Why 39? Couldn't have been a lot higher than that?
So what we do in NBS is to do sample survey. We are not population commission that do census. So we take a sample from the population to represent the entire geographical area where that sample is taken. There is methodology of doing that in terms of sampling in such a way that you know some variables, some factors that you consider in taking your sample. And when you take that sample, when you hear the statistician saying the sample or the result is given with 95% confidence interval, it means that you have taken that sample in a way that if you take another sample, as you said, you are still going to get the same result that still estimate for that population. If you take different sample at 95 times, all those samples, whether 45, whether 39, will still give you the same result and estimate as you have it in 39. So the 39,000 households covered has stages before we arrive at that. First, we take sample of enumeration areas, which we got from Population Commission in each of the states of the Federation. Then from those enumeration areas, we conducted a complete household listing in them. And then from those households that were listed, we also take a sample. So going through this multi-stage cluster selection gives us a robust sample that at the end of the day, the result getting from those enumeration areas accumulated to the state give us an estimate of what is happening in the entire state. That is the beauty of taking sample.
You know, when you initially spoke about the states, performance in the states, lots of people thought, oh, okay, some are doing good, others can do better. Incidentally, the governors will be meeting today, so hopefully, who knows if this will be one of the reasons will be considered on the agenda, as it were. So what did you find? Why is it that some are doing good and others not as much? What can they do to improve?
In actual fact, later today, we're launching the Primary Healthcare Challenge Fund with all the governors.
Oh, okay.
And this will come up,
Nice.
most certainly, because it's a very good baseline to show and to compare one state with another and to see why one state is doing better than the other and what are some of the challenges that the states who are doing less well could come across. I think, you know, the disparity is a very big issue in Nigeria across the board. There are some states where you've got immunization rates of 84%. Other states where 1 in 4 children are not being immunized. Wow. It really is very stark. And when you look across, it's not only states, but you also look across the variation in richness and poorness, education standards. The variation is quite amazing. Gender, I think it was something like 79% of women have access to telephones, 88% of men have access to telephones. That 10 percentage points is really significant when it comes down to the people. But, you know, your wealth, your gender, your geographical disparities, and your educational disparities are becoming more and more stark here in Nigeria.
All right. Has security got anything to do with it? Because we also know that in certain states have felt in recent times a security crunch. Maybe that's not the word to use, but a security challenge. And some states have been harder hit than some other states. Would you say that you also saw the effect of that in some of the surveys that were conducted?
It's difficult to see a direct result as a result of conflict or insecurity, but there's no question around, say, for example, nutrition, where stunting in some states is up to 42, 43%, and that those states happen to have insecurity as one of the prime underlying features. It could be a problem, but I think there are bigger problems. I mean, there's about wealth, there's about poverty, there's about gender, there's about educational disparities, and other such things which are actually have a more profound effect on this.
Well, I know my colleague Ayo would like to get some questions in. Ayo, over to you now.
Thank you, Markwe. Let me begin with you, Mr. Adeniro. The last report, I mean, this one, the last report said 1 in 10 children, you know, lose their lives. This one, however, says 1 in 8. Those who wonder, it's not really as significant as one would have expected. So the natural question, taken from some of the things that Mr. Hawkins just said, education, economic stability, or economic capacity, and the rest of them, what, in your opinion, are the gaps that needed to be filled? What kind of collaborations were not available that made it difficult for us to do a little more significantly than we did in this report? Because I'm very sure that's what you would probably have expected, at least 1 in 3, not up to 1 in 8.
All right, thank you. I think one way to improve on the result that we have, definitely there is significant improvement from 2016 to 2022, but as you said, we can do better. One of the things that we can do to get more improvement is to look at the result coming from our rural areas. If you look at the result, you can see that generally urban, those that are in urban areas have better results than what we have in our rural area. So whatever intervention that we are putting in place should be targeted more to the rural areas. We need to penetrate the rural areas. Also for head of household that are headed by somebody with higher education, those households also perform better than where the head of household is illiterate or not having adequate education, because this gives them access to some of the facilities that make their health to improve, that make their education level to improve, and have consequent impact on the children raised in those households. So the issue of education has to be work on. And you can see the situation that we have. If you look at the result, the impact or the reduction in some of the indicators on education, which means you have to work more in the area of education than we have now. The out-of-school children, the story is not good in that area. Also, when you look at literacy level, literacy level is also no much improvement in that aspect. So these are things that government at the state level as well as federal also needs to look at and work on in order for us to have improvement more than what we experience. And at the same time, the issue of inequality also need to be addressed, because when you look at the wealth quintile of all the indicators, you relate it to wealth quintile, you see that also that are well-to-do have much more better indicators than those that fall within the poor quintile.
Perhaps generally,
so also
Mr. Adeniro,
the inequality.
Yeah. Perhaps that also speaks to two things which are related. You spoke about the fact that, you know, the report, when it's released, it goes to the ministries, departments, and agencies, and I'm assuming it'll go from the federal government MDAs to state government MDAs, who would or should dissipate them to their various areas. So it speaks to the inadequate collaboration in that regard, plus the fact that the local government system will probably have done a lot more work in terms of raising awareness with the people, because no matter what words are put into these reports, at the end of the day, it's about execution, getting things done, getting foot soldiers into the various rural communities, as you and Mr. Hawkins have said. So in terms of getting the message down to the grassroots, would you say that we did enough just giving awareness about what we need to do in order to improve the figures more exponentially?
Thank you. So, Ayo, for the National Bureau of Statistics, what is important to us is that the result is out. We try from our own side to ensure that we cascade the launch to the state and to the zonal levels, so that people in the programmers, the implementers, will have this result handy for them to now strategize and improve on the way they approach their intervention. So it's not for NBS to go to the state to start looking at how they are going to improve on the education, on the nutrition.
Well, sometimes, Mr. Adeniro, if you forgive me, sometimes
left for the programmers. But
yes,
we will take the results to them, make it available to them, so that they'll be able to use it for their programs.
Well, sometimes when some of these agencies receive the reports, it just looks like, okay, it's just one of those things, one of those reports for the shelves. We hope they'll do something with this one. But let me ask Mr. Hawkins very quickly. Well, part of what you said at the launch, Mr. Hawkins, was that there's been some good progress, and we should celebrate that. We still have a long way to go toward ensuring the well-being of children in Nigeria. So in terms of providing a guide, which you said that this report is supposed to do for the federal and state governments as they plan their budgets, what are the things you are hoping would be used or utilized? How do you hope that this report will be useful in the planning of budgets by federal and state governments?
I hope it'll be integral, and it lends itself to your last question about trying to get it down to state level so that people see it and use it. But I think also, as I said yesterday, it's also about the Nigerian people, them knowing what is happening. What are the indicators? What are some of the disparities between their state and other states? And that information, getting it out into the public through the media, which is why we're here today, is so critical that they can hold their governors, they can hold their government to account for the services that they are receiving. And secondly, I think it's all around, as you said, about investment. How can governors or the federal government invest better, get a better return for their investment? And things like immunization, nutrition, basic education, these are not costly things. And the budget is there to be able to respond to these needs. It's about that execution. And what these figures do is hold the line ministries to account for that execution and for the use of those funds.
Gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about birth registration as we wind down on this one, because I see that since the NPC, as the Population Commission, was established, there's been some conflicting reports on the level of completeness of birth registration in the country. I see that the reports of live birth, death, and stillbirth registration in Nigeria between 1994 and 2007, commissioned by the NPC, by the way, claims that the birth registration was 0.01% in 1994, and then improved to 23.93% in 2007. But then, in the MIC's report, I also see that there was some improvement in birth registration completeness between 2007 and 2011, 31.5% and 41.5% in 2007 and 11, in that order, except in the Northeast. So, for this session, this particular one, what is it with the figures with the Northeast?
So the total figure is now 57%, which is great, but it's a long way from universal birth registration, which is what Nigeria is trying to achieve. So for the Northeast, it is about access to populations, it's about mobile populations, especially displaced populations and so on. So there's a lot of work being done. I think in the last quarter, it was something in the region of 200,000 children have been registered at birth. So that we can ensure that the displacement and conflict or insecurity that has affected birth registration is no longer a factor in that. And then there's a lot of work being done about it in the Northeast, as indeed for the rest of the country. Because one of the biggest problems with birth registration, and for me it's one of the most important issues, because it gives a child a unique identity, gives a child it becomes a statistic, a reality, and it has a very big impact on immunization, enrollment in schools, and so on and so forth, if a child is actually registered. But it's to build the digital platform so that the digitalization of birth registration becomes automatic, whether in a rural village, in an urban hospital, a maternity ward, or wherever. That child is always registered at birth, so they become a unique entity in this great country.
So, Adeniran, could you speak to why that disparity, though, between NPC's figures and that of MIC's?
I didn't see the disparity between the two figures. With what you just roll out now, there has been improvement from 1999 to 2007, and up to 2016, where we have 46%, and now we have 57% birth registration. So there has been the same pattern of improvement from the 1999 to date. So if you look at it, that's what I tell you about having confidence interval in figures. If you have 27% for a particular indicator, and another indicator is telling you 28%, if you look at the confidence interval and the two of them overlap, it's telling you that even though this figure, this particular indicator is 27%, and this other data is telling you 28%, if their confidence interval overlap, it means the result, the difference, is not significant to say that there is wide discrepancy, as you said. So if you look at their figures, the figure from National Population Commission and what the multiple indicator cluster result is given, the confidence interval is within the same, the two of them overlap, which means we are saying the same thing in terms of the population, because it's an estimate.
I'm just wondering, it's a question of now that we have love, what are we going to do with it? Now that this information has come out, are you going to be breaking it further in a way that Nigerians can understand and make sense of it? Especially as elections are coming, because they really need to. People have been saying that, you know, a lot of things are affecting our everyday lives, and we need to be able to make significant changes and ask those who seek to lead us how. Is the NBS going to break this further down, or is this just going to remain as this document? If you want to get a hold of it, you do.
So we have for wide variety of users, we have a bigger one that we call Solving Findings Report, which have for researchers and all that, they can make use of that. We have this snapshot that you can quickly look at the result. We also have what we call fact sheet, where it's also been simplified module by module. For instance, this one is just talking about immunization coverage. All the things here are all about immunization. So this is already broken down. We also have this that summarize what you have even in the snapshot. We have taken them module by module, the issue of birth registration. So the issue of child marriage, the issue of violent discipline. So you can see that we have gone further to have specific results for each of the modules, so that people can just pick it and say, what is this one saying? And then you can quickly see the result. And then use the intervention, the programmers can see what they want to do. So each person can take his own relevant area and see what they can do with the result. So it has further been broken down.
All right, so there you have it. Media can do well to even take their own, that variety of users. Well, gentlemen, Mr. Semiu Adeniran and Mr. Peter Hawkins, thank you both. Well done.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We will be back in a moment. Stay with us.